tortoises really are amazing creatures. They have a super slow growth rate. And until recently, and I mean the last couple of decades, no one even knew how long tortoises actually lived. It's only by having them born in captivity in a zoo, I think it was, and documenting birth to death, that they have some sort of an idea of how long the lifespan of tortoises are. And I think the one that they were documenting lived to be like 116 or something. They had a picture of it in the late 1890s and then in like 2012, which is just crazy. Now, I got my tortoise as a 5-day-old baby, and he was literally the size of a fortune cookie. As a matter of fact, he is on the second quick tip video, the thumbnail. That's the picture that I took of him next to the fortune cookie. And Mr. Fredrickson, by the way, is the mascot of Quick Tips because he's obviously very quick. So whenever you see pictures of Mr. Fredrickson on the thumbnail, you know that that's going to be a quick tip. So how does this relate to our careers in the music business? There's no such thing as an overnight success. There's no such thing as breaking into the industry. Now, I know that that's a super common kind of phrase that people love to use, especially if I'm in an interview and they say, if you had a tip to up-and-coming composers about breaking into the industry, and I say this every single time, you don't break in to any industry. Least of all the music industry, least of all the video game music industry. There's no breaking in. It's more like an ooze. And so the question is then, Jason, what's the best thing for me to do to ooze into the game music industry? You need to think like Mr. Fredrickson. Slow and steady wins the race. You need to be the tortoise, not the hare. And I'm pretty sure that this would apply to film, TV, library music. I'm speaking mostly about video games because that's just kind of most of my background. So think about slow and steady. Think about building your portfolio, which is the same thing as building your image, and having a slow and steady growth. I know that for the longest time, I kept waiting for that game that would put my name on the map and get me out there and sort of establish me as a legit composer. And I never really feel like it came along because I was on the inside looking out. Now, most people that would know anything about my career would say, well, that game was Dead Space, and that happened 6 or 7 years into my career in games. And in retrospect, I would totally agree. That was the game that helped establish my name. Now, I don't know if it was because the game was popular and it had Dead in the title and my last name is Graves. I think that sort of inexorably tied me to really scary music. A lot of people expect, a tattooed, leather-clad, pierced 6'4", 300-pound angry guy when they hear some of that music, and I'm just the way I am. And unapologetically happy. But when I was in the middle of it, I thought it was just going to be another game. It was just going to be something that I would do my best on, and then it would sort of get brushed under the carpet because it was so loud and so over the top and so experimental, and literally I had no idea what I was doing when I was working on it. And don't worry, we will talk specifically about Dead Space in the future, I promise. But I thought the game would come out, it would kind of get mediocre reception, and then that would be it. And as soon as I finished it, I moved on to some other projects. And when the game came out and started getting so much attention, I realized the attention was because of all the things I thought would make it sort of like, That's what a lot of people were sort of, it was perking their ears up. They were like, wait a minute, this score sounds kind of different from what we've heard before, and I was completely appreciative. But it wasn't because I went, yes, finally, I got that game, I've broken into the industry. It was sort of like, well, now what do I do? If this game got this much attention, I mean, where do I go from here? So a lot of what I want to talk about today is focusing on what is in your control. And I've done a lot of things in addition to being a composer. I've had my own media production company. I've done lots of radio spots. I've done commercials and library music and film and trailers and everything. And when I was doing my own production company, I was listening to a lot of kind of learn marketing, learn strategy sort of tapes in the car when I was driving. And the one thing I took away from that was this guy would come in every morning to the office and like smile at the secretary and try to get her, she always seemed like she was grumpy, try to cheer her up a little bit. And he got frustrated because nothing he ever did worked. And he realized that her mood was completely out of his control. What he could control is every day when I go to work, I'm going to tell her a joke, or I'm going to smile and compliment her on something, or just say something positive to her. So his goals completely changed. Instead of trying to make her happy, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't have any control over it, he controlled what he was going to be doing. And the happy ending to that kind of story would be that as a result of that, she ended up being in a better mood over time because he was more focused on what he could actually control. So it's the exact same thing with us as composers. What are we in control of? We're in control of what we know. We're in control of the techniques that we use, the knowledge that we accrue through books or YouTube or videos, how to use our tools. We're in control of the music that we write. So even if we don't have any clients, maybe we're just writing for ourselves, which I did for a really, really long time. I wrote my own music library that was probably 150 or 160 songs by the end. And I'd do different 30-second versions like A, B, C, and D. I'd do instrumental versions or versions without a melody. If it was already instrumental, I'd do 3 different stingers, alternate mixes, and every week, when I didn't really have much of a job, I was spending it working on that music library. I wasn't thinking about, I want to build a music library when I was doing it. I was just thinking, I want to learn how to write music that sounds like X. So it was studying something and then applying that in a physical way to learning both the techniques of orchestration and harmony, but also mixing and producing and kind of getting that sort of library mentality in my head with stems and alternate mixes and different edit lengths and things like that. So we're in control of kind of everything we know in our music portfolio. Now, those 2 things alone, you're already sort of establishing yourself as an artist. And the third thing that I think kind of is the icing on the cake is we're in control of our online presence. Now, that doesn't mean that you post to message boards and say, hey guys, check out my new track, and put a link to it. It means that you're engaging people online and on a personal level, and you're replying to posts, and you're suggesting things, and you're helping people, and maybe you've got a link at the bottom of your post that has your website. But those 3 things together, that's sort of like who we are, our digital selves now, online and everything. The last kind of key would be extending that to physical one-on-one relationships, which I know a lot of people either aren't in the right kind of place to like go to a convention and meet other people that are working on games, or they're not people. They're not big on getting out there and talking and making small talk and networking and stuff like that. And I've never really thought about, like if I go to a convention, which is probably conventions and local independent game developer meetings like in your town or maybe the town away from you are great places to start. So if I go to things like that, I'm just looking to meet friends. I'm not thinking of it from a music standpoint. I'm not thinking of it from a career standpoint. I'm thinking we all have lots of things in common here. Even if no one in this room of, let's say it's 30 people and I'm at a local kind of meetup, maybe no one else in here is a composer or even does audio, but we all love games, and I want to get to know some of these people. And through getting to know other people, they're getting to know you as well, especially if you're not shoving a business card with a URL on it or a CD or something in their face immediately and introducing yourself as a composer and talking about what great music you could make for them, because that's just static. That's white noise. The bottom line is today is an amazing time to be a composer because technology, pretty much the tools are available to anyone who wants them, for free even, to make music. And that's fantastic, and I love it because I think so many different people have so many different backgrounds and so many different things to say and so many different musical perspectives. Now, the flip side of that coin is technology allows pretty much anyone to be able to write music. And while it's amazing because people have that opportunity, it also creates a lot of static. So that's why I said the CD with your name and how excited you are. It needs to be about personal relationships. And that's why the tortoise is the way to go, because personal relationships take time. They take persistence, and it just, you need to put into it. You get out what you put in. And it's not just a quick like on Facebook or a quick, a super quick answer to a question. It's, being yourself online, being yourself at these meetings. There's all kinds of conferences all over the world. There's local places that you can go to. And I would say if you're looking for a place to start online, the GANG, the Game Audio Network Guild, is a great place to start online because it's all about audio, and it's an online place where composers and sound designers and everyone can kind of get together. There probably all kinds of questions can be answered there, and it's a great starting point. And the flip side of the GANG coin is it's where anyone can go to gather information or post anything. So again, that's where your kind of music portfolio and your digital self really come into being. You want people to see your name and think about something and not who's that person. They want to read your name and think about like how helpful you were on a forum, or pieces of music maybe that they heard someplace because they visited your website, or what I really love is how approachable and friendly and enthusiastic you seemed when they met you at some sort of a conference. It's all about the personal relationship. So that's why I'm kind of talking about, you build up your mind with knowledge, and you kind of build up yourself personally, and you get out there and meet people, because really here we're all exactly the same. We all love music. We all love games if we're talking about music for games. And that's where we all connect, but on a personal level. So I have a funny story, and then I'll finish preaching. But it was, I don't remember now, 4 years ago maybe, I finally took my own advice. I've been giving the same advice for a long time, and there's a local IGDA chapter somewhere in the Triangle in North Carolina where I live, like Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and it kind of moves around. But I wasn't sure where it was, and I went on the website and contacted them and said, hey, when are you meeting next? I think they meet once a month. And I went to the meeting and met some super nice people and introduced myself, and I wasn't, like I said before, thinking I want to get more work or I want to make more money. I was thinking I want to meet people in North Carolina around here that are doing games, and maybe we can work on something together, regardless of budget. I don't even care if there is a budget. I wanted to do, more down-to-earth kinds of projects, as well as the big things that I was working on. And I met this great guy named Chris Cooper, came right up to me after the meeting and introduced himself. And he said, oh, we're working on this game, and we're 20 minutes away from you. We'd love to have you come out and take a look. It'd be so great if maybe we could work on something together. And I thought inside, like, yes, this is great. Like, I love Dead Space and Command and Conquer and Tomb Raider, and all those games are amazing. But there's a lot of similarity with those games, and they're really violent, and the music is super intense, and I was looking forward to something more of an indie sort of vibe, something a little less intense, less, rated T for teen or whatever the top rating is. So fast forward a couple weeks, and I've sort of been all excited about going to meet him. We go out there and we go to lunch and we just hang out, and I see their space, and we do all the stuff that I feel like you should do when you're first meeting, which is not like, oh, show me your game, let's talk about it. And then at the very end, literally the very end, we're kind of like getting ready to leave, and he's like, oh, so the game, you want to see the game real quick? I'm just like, sure. And I'm picturing like, I don't know, something with like bunny rabbits or like a puzzle game, or I don't know, something. And he's like, okay, so we're doing this zombie shooter. and I think I said something like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. You're doing a zombie shooter. Okay, that's cool. Like, I can I can do a zombie shooter. That's great. It just wasn't, you know, what I had built up in my head. And that game ended up being Deadline. Man, I should have done my research. I didn't even think about mentioning this until I was recording. I'll put a link to the soundtrack and the game in the description. But I ended up having a blast. They let me do anything I wanted. I wrote way more music than they ever thought that they needed, which is kind of the way it works. And I ended up doing a bunch of other games with them as well. And some really fun ones that, you know, not bunny rabbits, but maybe mutated cows and stuff like that. But not super crazy horror, like heavy duty kind of thing. So in a long-term way, my goal of going to that first IGDA meeting and meeting Chris was completely fulfilled, but it takes time. Everything takes time. And the only way you learn to be patient is you have to wait. And if that means you go to one convention a year and you save up a little bit of money and you're going to, let's say, GDC, which is not cheap to go to, travel-wise or ticket-wise, you go to GDC every year. It's a big convention, there's lots of people. You're gonna walk away with so many business cards you don't know what to do, and probably most of them are gonna be your competition. And that's just the way it works. I love, and I use competition very loosely, I love hanging out with my competition more than I love like going and trying to find work. I just will not do that. I'll go hang out with my fellow composers because we all have a common bond. And that's what it's all about, is that commonality. And then you also will find people that do sound design or sound effects implementation, or they're an audio director, and your reach, you know, that net that you cast, the reach gets wider every single time. So I think the moral of this story is, now that Mr. Fredrickson has left us, tortoise and not the hare. Think slow and steady wins the race.